A beautiful Saturday to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of your favorite news magazine program, 90 Minutes in Africa. We are broadcasting from Douala, the economic capital of Cameroon in Central Africa. My name is Boh Elvis, the anchor, and my guest is already in the studio, Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong, who is a Muslim scholar and an imam. Other guests are going to be joining us any moment from now for us to talk about the genuineness of Muammar Gaddafi's Pan-Africanism vision. That is what we are going to be taking a look at in today's edition of the program. How genuine was Muammar Gaddafi's Pan-Africanism vision? Of course, I begin with the introductory statement. Muammar Gaddafi believed that the united Africa would speak with one voice at the international fora, such as the United Nations, and could be able to bargain and be seen as equal partner. The late Libyan leader pushed the agenda of a United States of Africa, hoping to one day have a unified African government, the only way to develop Africa without Western interference. Many experts have suggested that Gaddafi was murdered for standing up to the West and for trying to promote very progressive ideas for Africa, not liked by the West. He wanted to introduce a gold dinar to back African currencies, create a united Africa with its own currency, an army to defend the continent, and a single passport. Despite his good intentions for the continent, some of his critics do not see the late leader as a saint. His countrymen knew him as a thin-skinned dictator who brushed no dissent, and he was accused of being a racist who considered Africans to be beneath him. His critics also say that while in Rome in 2010, Gaddafi openly warned Europeans about letting ignorant Africans through their borders because the barbarians will destroy the advanced continent. We don't know what will happen. What will be the reaction of the white and Christian Europeans faced with the influx of starving and ignorant Africans, he allegedly said. According to testimonies from close aides, Gaddafi used to make insultive comments about African leaders during their visit to his palace. He allegedly said, quote, "Bring that black slave in reference to the president of an African nation who was preparing to visit him. A story on thisisafrica.me suggests Gaddafi will refer to even those whose compliments pleased him as idiots. Based on all of these facts and allegations, therefore, how genuine was Gaddafi's Pan-Africanism vision? Our guests in the studio today are going to attempt answers on 90 Minutes in Africa. Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong, thank you so much for accepting our invitation today on 90 Minutes in Africa.
Alhamdulillah, the pleasure is all mine. It's always a pleasure to be able to serve the African continent and to serve humanity in one way or another.
Okay, thank you. We are expecting the other guests that are going to be joining us any moment from now in the studio. But for those who are watching, remember you can join the online. You can watch us online by going to My Media Prime TV on Facebook, liking and sharing to as many groups as possible to invite them to come and watch the show. That is My Media Prime Television. You can also go to a BT Media Group, which is on YouTube, and of course there you can be able to subscribe to our YouTube page and watch. You can go to, if you're on Canal Sat, which is like the French satellite, you can watch us on channel 309. And there are other cable networks like Swecom. The Swecom cable network, of course, is carrying our channel, and many other relay channels across Africa. And soon you will be able to watch us on StarTimes. So that is where you can watch us, and of course share and keep the conversation going by sending in your messages either through SMS or through WhatsApp, so that we can be able to read them out. And of course you can send in questions to the guests that are with us in the studio. So before we continue with the program, as you know, Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong, this is the back to school period, and I'm trying the year to trace a very something I saw this morning written by Dr. Fru, who is a member of our group 90 Minutes in Africa, and I'm happy this morning that I've just also been joined by Dr. John Ako, who is a consultant in this program and a legal expert. It's back to school period, and I know that many parents are trying to send their children back to school, Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong, and many of them are a little bit confused about which kind of orientation to give their children. And I saw something written by Dr. Fru, who is a doctor, an African doctor. He said The problem with our educational system, our technician is going to post that while I read it. He said this. Of course, before we get into the main topic, this is just like a teaser for the show today. He said, the problem with our educational system is that people with gifts of tailoring, hunting, carpentry, bricklaying, medicine have failed its citizens. Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong, your reaction to what Dr. Fru has said at the time when parents are trying to send their children back to school?
Well, alhamdulillah, this is a very complicated topic. But what I can say is that education as itself can either be a tool for development, and by development I mean development spiritually, intellectually, morally, physically, ethically, and so on, or it can be a tool for indoctrination and brainwashing. Now, it depends on who calls the shots. If I can take the example of medicine. In the 18th century in America, medicine was a very whole art which was practiced in all its aspects, including the use of natural herbal remedies, the use of energy healing, the use of Reiki and many other types of acupuncture and so on. Every art of healing which the planet Earth had developed was available to the practitioner to use for a healing purpose. Then came somebody called Rockefeller, who was a champion in the new burgeoning petroleum industry, and needed sources of avenues where his product can go, because there were not many cars in those days. And his advisors told him that many of the remedies which are given to people can be analyzed and certain molecules extracted, which will then be manufactured artificially from petroleum, for which he will have the patent. In other words, it can be a great source of revenue if he goes around substituting all the natural remedies with artificial ones. He made set up a commission which went all about America in order to gather bad and horrendous stories about mistakes and inside the medical practice, in order to scare the population as to the practice of medicine, and then argued with a lot of political lobbying that the way medicine is handled is disorganized. He now went on to create a body which would supervise the training and the implementation of medicine in America, and generously gave a grant of $100 million. Now, $100 million in the 18th century was a lot of money. With this grant, Rockefeller and his collaborators could now decide what is taught in the medical school. They can now decide who is practicing medicine properly and who is not. So suddenly, the body which is now set up to supervise the production or the training of medical doctors now becomes an instrument of manipulation and transformation. In other words, transforming things in a way which will satisfy his interests. Of course, it did not go unscathed. There were many doctors who protested, others were arrested. And in the end, I'm sad to say that he succeeded.
Of course, he succeeded because we are not organized.
No, I'm talking about medicine. We have not even come to education, the topic. So he succeeded in creating a medical profession which is there. Doctors are trained today to promote the international pharmaceutical mafia, which produces medicine based on chemical products which have more side effects than the disease itself. And we are now in a situation where people are not being cured, but they are just being treated. Something which makes the international pharmaceutical mafia to be number 3 in the line of different types of industries in the world. First, you have banking, second, petroleum, third, the international pharmaceutical mafia in terms of revenue. This was done because you had an educational body which decided who knows and who does not. Now, we come now to the example you gave in Africa. You've cited a lot of things. Who decides whether or what should be taught? Who decides what the syllabus should be? How free is that person in terms of the brainwashing and conditioning we've all experienced as a result of colonialism and all the things we've gone through? I gave examples some time ago how I calculated the dimension of a certain pipe which could produce 525 hertz in order to bring about the modification of DNA, because that is the new direction medicine is taking. Vibratory medicine is the new direction. You might have heard the word medbed, something which is coming very soon. And then I was surprised after producing my pipe that many traditional healers, when you go to them, you find them with a pipe blowing. You find the Aborigines in Australia healing people just with bamboo pipe dancing around them. But because this has not been, does not satisfy the interest of the international pharmaceutical mafia, it will never be promoted. So we're having a situation where education has been an indoctrination rather than something useful for Africans, and it is necessary now for us to redefine exactly what should be taught to our people and who decides whether you know or not. Once you put anybody who has to decide whether a person know that that body has the power to transform or to brainwash or to encourage in a positive direction, depending on what the motivation is. So I quite agree with the doctor in the sense that we have many disciplines, and if you look at the early scholars who made a mark in history, people like Nikola Tesla, Isaac Newton, Michael Faraday, and so many of them, they all excelled in many disciplines. In other words, they would talk in chemistry, you find them talking in astronomy, you find them talking in physics, in electricity, and so on. So there is no discipline which is isolated. You cannot be a medical doctor and know nothing about physics. So where does this idea of specifying professions come, where people specialize in one thing and then that is not, such a person cannot be useful. Even if you have to go deep into one particular field, you must have a general knowledge of most of the other fields in order to be able to collaborate. So in my own opinion, I think that we should completely reformulate, completely rearrange, and completely restructure the concept of education in Africa.
Okay, thank you, Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong. Let's get, that's not our topic of the day, I want to tell our viewers. It's just that we want to, it's a kind of a teaser because it's back to school and people are interested about education. Before we move to talk about Muammar Gaddafi, I think it's good to talk about some things that concern people around us. Dr. Akuhmbom is a lecturer, and of course he is a legal expert and our regular guest in this show. Doctor, I want to get your perspective on what Dr. Fru said, talking about bringing together people having talent in hunting, tailoring, carpentry, bricklaying, medicine, and then grading them together. And according to him, this might not be the right way to go for Africa.
Yeah, normally, somewhere you will bear with me that education was meant to solve the basic problems of the people. If you go to the United States, there is what they call the R&Ds. Research must equate development. And if research cannot equate development, then it was not based to be. Then that particular education was not supposed to be. If we are in Africa, the first problems we have is hunger, then it will mean that research and education should first of all be guaranteed towards solving the problems of hunger. If the problem was construction pattern, because when you realize today in Africa, you realize that, like what Sheikh was saying, that we are being manipulated because of colonial past. And a lot of Africans, you are in Africa, you wish to construct a structure, you look at a structure in Berlin. You want to construct as pineapple or what you have seen in New York. And you have forgotten that those two environments and the geography are not the same. And so your structure in Douala, which is a very hot town at sea level, should not resemble a structure that is based in London, where we know that always they are chunked with extreme cold situation. And when you go there, you instead again, you marveled that we produce wood in Africa, but wood is not serving as a raw material for construction in Africa. And then when you get to UK, where they know that to insulate a house, the house must totally be constructed in wood. Wood carried from Africa now define proper structural building in the UK because it protects and keeps the environment safe for them. This is where Africans have equally failed. And we are those people thinking that educational reforms must take into consideration the needs and demands of the people. Sometime I made a statement, those who were doing human resource management had problems, Those who were doing accounting equally had problems. Marketers had problems. And we said, and I asked, what are you training marketers for? What are they going to sell? What have you produced? What are you having to sell? So if you can't answer this question positively, you ask, why then are you in school? In an African setting, you ask us today, how many companies own a human resource department? Do they really need it? In a microcosm where Africa is, that education to a company, not more than 500 personnel, has a father, mother, and children managing the same company, all of them can perform the same function. Meaning they can easily count their money. They can easily know which personnel takes how much back home. Do they really need a human resource manager? And so it becomes so funny that we train in domains that we cannot use. We train in domains that cannot serve the economic interests of Africans. Yes, Africa is said to be a third world economy. Third world economy, which means production to be treated towards agriculture. And you ask yourself, how many of our universities train agriculture engineers today own plantations? The same plantations that were given to us by our colonial masters are the plantations we are even trying to maintain, not talk less of expanding. Because we are still unable to even expand above the limits or the boundaries of the colonial era. So you ask, are we really going to school to solve the problem of Africans, or we are here to solve the problem of Europeans? People have failed to know that a lot of education that was given to us by the West was purposefully to solve or save their industries. And so a lot of the manpower that we trained back at home before independence was to give labor abroad.
So, Doctor, I come in here to say that we have a lot of confusion from some of the students that have succeeded in the General Certificate of Education, the examinations. Many of them had very excellent grades. But from those I've been talking with, they don't seem to have a vision about what they want to do because the options seem limited. You know, they're just like, okay, you can do history, I can go and do literature, I can do this, and so on and so forth. They don't. We now see that probably in the next 3 or in the next 4 years, I mean, they will not be able to satisfy the job market because they will not be apt enough to be able to come up with solutions that can have an impact on the economy. What do you have to say to these students who want to make choices as far as the tertiary education is concerned?
Yeah, that is what I was saying at the beginning. When you come to Africa today, not like we are not going to satisfy the job market. We are going to satisfy the job market, but a lot of people will be vacant. A lot of those who said they were in school will be vacant because the training they had received cannot solve a particular economic problem or cannot fit a particular life reality in Africa. Somebody, like I just said here, that studies maybe human resource development, and you come to Africa, very few companies invest in developing the personnel they are working with. Meaning very few companies believe in education within the professional world. Meaning my workers have a right to get back to school. There is a need to call for people so they come and receive more training back. People don't talk of updating education. Today, what I will tell you is that I have told students, we don't get to university. Somebody said you want to read biochemistry. You are in Africa, we are in Cameroon. Yes, you had a brilliant point. You want to do biochemistry. And I asked the question, when you are going to do biochemistry, what is your objective? Where do you intend to work? Today, the people who call biochemists that are based in the chemical or food industry, we don't believe in what we train internally for now. We still believe that those who are at the University of Leeds and University of Manchester, when you get to places like Brazzaville, Guinness, they bring the expatriates from Ireland. And so our own expatriate in terms of biochemistry cannot work because you studied in a local laboratory that's not even developed. So why not take something like civil engineering, which means that we are already constructing houses, you can gain a job in building roads. Look at today, we are talking of digital marketing. It is not the number of points that you have that are valuable, but what you end up to become. Education is not the certificate we brandish. Education is what you ended to impact in the society.
Doctor, let me come in to say I was talking to a young man who manufactures robots. I mean, here in Cameroon, I think I'll be bringing him to the show. He manufactures robots and he does lots of things, you know, in terms of innovation and coming up with prototypes and stuff. But what's happening is that this young man cannot have access to a professional training school because according to him, he did not have physics. at the advanced level. But he manufactures robots. So how can we handle such situations?
No, we have been crying this. He is not the lone person. Somebody has invented a groomer, a compressor. Look online, you find a lot of Cameroonians. There was a small guy at the Lycée Technique, the Bafoussam, even made to fly an airplane using a remote control from the ground. There is another small child in Libya that invented a chain food using wood, meaning he could manipulate it with local battery made. If a child at 7 could manipulate 2 batteries opposite end and control a wood machine, he is more than a genius. If it was in Europe, you would have heard the story on news headlines. But now, since it's Africa, we don't learn how to sell and manage our own. And this is what it is. We are looking at engineers. We need to build our own plane. Cameco should be made in Cameroon. And I saw this young man at Lycée Bafoussam. All the classmates came out and clapped for him. How it happened, nobody can tell. This young man need to train. I'm going to get you again to a more amazing domain. We have admired a lot of structures abroad which can really induce learning. I want to tell you there's what we call university games, FENASCO A games and B games. What are the interests? I used to call the rationale behind such innovation is to detect talent. But get to the games and ask the ministry, from the games you are organizing, maybe this is the 10th edition, how many talent has the nation detected? A child which is less than 7 takes gymnastics on its own and won a medal. What has become of that child? That created brilliant results at FENASCO B games and A games. We are looking at those who are going to represent Cameroon in the next 8 years Olympic Games. Taking a child from primary 6 to represent Cameroon in the next 5 years is just enough talent. We have a school they call National School of Youth and Sports. When you go there, you need to look at the criteria how you become a sport tutor in that school, a trainee to train sportmen. The first quality is that you should be capable of feeding a domain in sport. Those who are going to be coaches or teachers of sports should be better examples. So we find that in what we discovered is that at times Africans are admirers of Western civilization, but they are unable to use it to serve their purpose. Cameroon is waiting maybe to participate in the next World Cup, and you will hear stories of the youngest player at the World Cup. They will tell that it's 17 years. And in Africa, we look at it as it's not possible. But when we move for university games, you will not tell us that in all the universities in Cameroon, there are about 9 or 10 of them who participate in this event, we are unable to detect 1 talent or 2. What are the objectives of the government in organizing such forum? One thing again I want to get you here, which will puzzle you. Nobody had learned how China becomes an emerging economy. Nobody had learned how China made it positive. We have programs in schools. People call what we call tutor project. Tutor project is written at the end of the level 3. A bachelor's degree. A student who is earning a bachelor's degree in a few months' time is advised to write. They group themselves into 3 or 4 or 5 to bring out a project. We call it tutor project. And I asked, after writing your own thesis, you write a project. What's the intention of the project? Theoretically, they are told that the project is what they are going to realize after leaving school. Is there any center? Is there any incubator where these projects are tailored and maybe the best selected and those students put under a system of control and study so that in 5 years, the next Dangotes or the next Alibaba should come out from this group? China and Americans are doing it already. Meaning they artificially promote billionaires and they read it every year. That this year we have generated 10 billionaires, next year we need 20. The moment you generate income actors, those who generate or create wealth, there is already enough reason that you have solved your economic problem. One of the greatest economic problems nations have found it very difficult to solve is unemployment. The moment you generate billionaires who go through creation of companies and wealth centers, you already solved that. Imagine once again somebody like Jack Ma throughout the world recruiting more than 4 million people in one way or the other, direct or indirect, have 3 or 4 Jack Ma in Africa. What will be unemployment?
And Doctor, before I come to Professor Akuhmbom, if you are given the opportunity, for instance, based on what you are saying, it means that we are supposed to maybe have a school of entrepreneurship, a school of business, for instance. And if you are to choose lecturers in this kind of institution, are you going to be going in for people who are maybe doctors in business administration, or you'll be bringing in business, I mean, practical business administrators or entrepreneurs like Dangote to come and teach in such institutions? What is the best option?
Within an academic center where we need practitioners, not theoreticians, it is but normal that the blend of two. There are people who are good in theory and there are excellent guys who are doing it in the field. The meaning, every academic program should be capable. Since they are practitioners, 60% of their work should be practice. Those with experience. Take Dangote, take Tony Omelu. Give him 4 hours to tell us the secret how he conquered the world with one of his company. Take young man, why not? Give him the million, let him come to Cameroon and give a seminar to future potential entrepreneurs of what becomes. That should just be a validated review. At the end of the day, in 2 weeks, students are advised to write exam on what he taught them practically. We need experience in this field.
That he gives them capital instantly to invest.
That's what I call incubators. When we train people who are going to become entrepreneurs, we regroup them. Remember, the most successful business is partnership business. But a lot of African holdings remain on what we call family paraphernalias. It is my father's business and nobody can add anything to it. Even when you know you cannot go above your own village, you are proud of holding it back. Businesses are meant to impact the world, not a local community. This is where Africans again are poor. So you go to some companies, you see they are doing well internally, but the people are afraid of bringing in foreigners. When you think of what Dangote has done, many people don't even know that the Dangote group of companies is not just Dangote the individual. You see, there are a lot of other giant partners behind him. And this is what business is. So most often, for us to succeed, you need a business setup where children come out with ideas. Such projects written are evaluated by a commission, not a corrupt commission like the one that exists in Cameroon. People of goodwill that can award and evaluate projects that can impact the life based on the authenticity of the idea within such documents. And why not? We can even seek for international finance. Remember that the Dangote Cement Cameroon was not consulted with Dangote's money. That project was presented to investors who think that investing in a cement factory in Cameroon will create 400 jobs directly and over 1,000 indirect jobs. And the IMF just simply need to look. Meaning, just opening this company will serve 1,000, create 1,000 jobs. It's positive. They'll finance it.
Thank you, Dr. Ako. Let us get the perspective. Of course, I want to tell our viewers that that is not our topic of the day. But because, of course, we need to be current and it's back to school, we decided to give this teaser to be able to help children that are, thinking about making life decisions about what to study in school. Now, Professor Akuhmbom Mark Cantoni, when I was in Government Bilingual High School, Fundong, in the northwest of Cameroon, we had a vice principal who was young Charles. He used to say, I know the thing, but how to say the thing is the thing. I'm talking about the grading system. I want you to talk about the grading system. I know the thing, but how to say the thing is the thing. Which means that probably when you take a look at the way children or students are graded in the General Certificate of Education examinations, you will discover that there are some students who know what has been asked as a question, but sometimes they can deliver it orally. They are better in delivering it orally more than written. There are some people that when they're writing, they lose connection with what is coming in from your mind. And there are people that are able to deliver it just orally, and others are able to write it down. And so you now discover that sometimes a student who knows how to speak or who can deliver it orally fails an examination because probably he was not given the opportunity to present it orally. So at this particular point in time, are you for the fact that our General Certificate of Education grading should take into consideration both the written and the oral part of the examination, that is from a 50-50 perspective?
Thank you, Mr. Boh, and to my fellow panelists and to Cameroonians and Africans who are watching at us at this particular hour. It is a pleasure indeed to be here. I think talking about the grading systems that we have in our educational systems all over the world, particularly in Cameroon, we have a problem with it. I want to begin by making this very controversial statement. I know you might say, Professor is saying that. Yes, but I'm going to be saying it. Schools were not actually instituted to help people become rich. Schools were instituted to be able to tame people. Schools were instituted as a means to imprison people and make them to fit in the form. So a school is a formatting institution where individuals are brought in to be formatted to think in a particular direction. We're not, you see, I am one of those persons who believe that schools are not what will give jobs to persons. A lot of us who think that you need to go to school to come back have a job. That was the counsel that they used to give us when we were young. They would tell us, you need to go to school, have good grades. When you have good grades, you have a good job, and you can become rich. But that particular principle and philosophy of prosperity is a lie, because schools were created to make poor people. Why did I say that? Schools were never created to create entrepreneurs. Schools were created to create employees. Why? When you go to school, you have to get a particular knowledge to come so that you can be employed somewhere for you to give that knowledge. You were not supposed to go to school to come and be a job creator. You are going to school to become an employee. Why do you become an employee? When you become an employee, you make the nation pay its taxes by you paying taxes, pay its debt. The nation pays its debts through those who go to school and come and get jobs. So when you go to school, you go to be formatted so that you can come work for the state and for your employer. You make your employer rich and you make the state rich, but you remain poor. And so schools were never created to actually transform, the individuals to become rich. So the grading system is another way to kind of select those with high IQ. High IQ in the sense that these individuals have a good memory. They can memorize very well and they can be able to give it fast. So they grade it. They say, okay, because you were able to go to school, memorize, then you are graded well. But you know what? To memorize is not education. Once a person memorizes something and is able to pour it back, he has not been educated. That is why at the end of the day, a lot of these individuals with A grades end up working for those with C grades. End up working for those who did not even go to school.
So what makes those who did not go to school better than those who have A grades?
It's just like you take a lion, you bring in a zoo, you try to work on its habits. You tame it, you are educating it to fit in the environment. Then you allow another lion in the bush. When you bring the two in front of maybe a prey, there is a way the lion that has been tamed reacts when it sees a prey. It is reserved. But the wild animal goes for the prey because it is in him to prey. Every one of us is created to produce. There's something in every human being. And as long as you are not aware that you are not supposed to produce, you will produce. But when you are taken to school, you are formatted to believe that there is a way this thing needs to be done. So you become limited by the academic system. So at the end of the day, most people go to school and end up becoming dull, not being productive, becoming consumers instead of being productive. So our educational systems that we have, particularly in Africa, not only in Africa, even in Europe, because some of us are talking as if Europe is different. If you go to Europe, those who are rich, those in the United States who are rich, are those who drop out from school. You'll be shocked to hear that. Listen to me. I am not condemning education in any way. I'm simply saying that our educational system needs a lot of work. And one thing I'll say, using the words of Gaddafi, when education is imposed on individual, that is human right abuse in itself. You are supposed to give different categories of educational system. In fact, people want to just do their vocational training, they do it by their means. Those who want to do, so different educational possibilities are supposed to be created. There are those who don't need schools. There are those who think that apprenticeship.
Are you saying that if you give birth to a child and the child is 5 years and you're thinking about sending the child to class 1, you should wait for the child to reach an age of consent so that the child can decide whether to go to school or not?
There's a difference between giving a child an understanding of how to read and to write and to educate the child. schools don't educate. Schools actually orient people to fit in a form. Education is something that is independent. You educate yourself. Individuals who want to be educated don't need the school to educate them, because there are a lot of schooled illiterates, individuals who have gone to school but they are not educated. A lot of them. There are many.
Thank you, Prof.
So if we have to follow that pattern, you end up saying that the system, I want to be categorical. You see, we have a limitation in the way we present our things here in Africa. We have held on to those things that we thought were good, because somebody told me before the white man came to Africa, Africans were illiterate, Africans were not educated. I was a little bit shocked and perplexed. Why? Because that was a wrong thinking. That's what they have made him to believe. But in Africa, education actually began here with us. And we believed in this system of education where you go to learn what you want to become. You sit under a mentor who knows the thing. That is why today there's a saying that says, follows he that knows the road. You don't follow people who don't know where they are going to. So if you want to do a particular trade, you need to sit along with the persons who know how to do it. You want to become an entrepreneur, locate entrepreneurs to form you. There is no school so far that teaches entrepreneurship. Most of our schools, they teach business management and all that. They use terminologies which are not true. So there is no school so far teaching entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is learned by sitting with an entrepreneur. It is not learned in a school. So the question you asked Dr. Ako, whether if he was given the opportunity, will he bring in Dangote to come and teach, or will he bring theoreticians? The funny thing is that a theoretician does not know the way, so he cannot lead the people out. He might come and say all the things he say, but he will never practice it. You need to bring in those who know. And that is why, if you look in the society, the philosophy the rich have is different from the philosophy the poor have. And what happens? Schools gives you the philosophy of the poor, but the rich have their philosophy, which they keep secretly. So you must be willing to go deep and walk along with them to be able to understand their philosophies. And till tomorrow, our schools will not make people rich. Our schools are meant to form people to fit in the system, to work for the government.
Thank you so much, Professor Akuhmbom, Mark Anthony. Ladies and gentlemen, this is 90 Minutes in Africa. Time for us to recognize some of our viewers. Greetings to you, Etene Alain, who says happy weekend to all of you. He's watching from the United Arab Emirates. Greetings to you, Ngubong Valerie Tamba. Connection has taken over meritocracy in Africa. That's what he says. Greetings to you, Kingston Fado. He says, well spoken, Dr. Ako, John Ako. The rich families in Africa don't want to see new millionaires and billionaires. Ngubong Valerie and Tamba. That is greetings to you too. Dr. Wesley Angoni Tiku, international diplomat, who is also watching this program live from the United States. Now, I ask this question just one minute before we dive into Gaddafi. You know, I'm sorry that we needed to do this teaser just 1 minute before we dive into Gaddafi. Now, I'm going to begin with you, Sheikh. Don't you think, despite all what you guys have said, the governments in place are supposed to put in place measures? I mean, our African governments, don't you think they're supposed to put in place measures to ensure that citizens should be able to grow, and I mean, we should be able to grow the economies, like making the environment suitable for growth by citizens?
A typical example I can give you is the so-called IQ test. A European came to a group of people who are herdsmen in Africa, and asked a young child, when you go out with 100 cows and 3 go missing, how many cows do you bring back? European mentality is, once you see whether the child can subtract arithmetic, 100 minus 3 is equal to 97. That is the intelligent child in Europe. But this child in Africa said, no, when you lose 3 cows, you don't come back home. You stay there and look for them until you find them. In Africa, that is the intelligent child. So when you say IQ test, what does it measure? You know, that itself depends on culture and everything. Now, so you asked, you asked about the government. You see, your government no longer serves you. It serves the banks.
Yes, true.
That no longer loan money, but create debt from thin air. because they just print these things.
There's no money in the first place.
And which is enforced by the police, who no longer work for you, but whom you are taught in school to obey. And in school, the school itself is no longer an institution of learning, but that of indoctrination. It's a center designed to make you passively accept a culture, which is not created by individuals, but by the very system that you depend on, that depends on your obedience. Now, so I think that pretty much gives a suitable answer. If you wanted to put another way, the governments and the presidents are the last people who have a say in what happens in the world.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Mohammed, Ngubong, Dr. Akujanaku. Of course, I think we are not going to focus on this topic again. Time for us to dive into what we decided to talk about today. How genuine was Muammar Gaddafi's Pan-Africanism vision? I already read the introductory statement at the start of this program. Muammar Gaddafi wanted to introduce a gold dinar to back African currencies. He wanted to create the United States of Africa. He wanted Africa to have its own currency, an army to defend the continent, as well as a single passport. Of course. But of course, at the same time, to Muammar Gaddafi also criticized because many people say he was racist, who considered Africans to be beneath him, and also someone who wanted to impose himself as a self-styled king on the continent, to be referred to as the King of Kings of Africa. So how genuine were his intentions for Africa, and how can we take from what can we do from where he ended for his vision to become reality? Dr. John Aku, I begin by understanding from you the importance of introducing a gold dinar to back up African currencies, which was, of course, the idea of Muammar Gaddafi.
Yeah, one of the things you should know that we need to know that Gaddafi was a revolutionary leader. And within the revolutionary leaders, they always come with their ideas and a future perspective of the nation. Why not the continent at large? People have forgotten that Muammar Gaddafi made an African Union that was a begging organization, and that to many international organizations, Africans are not supposed to be autonomous financially. And whoever's currency is pegged to the West should know simply that his economy is dictated from the West. And so there was a need. Not only that Gaddafi is thinking that Africa becoming financially autonomous with African central banks regulating their own economy will do us more good. And to a lot of others, Gaddafi was thinking that a common currency for the whole of Africa should be capable of competing other world economies. Today, can you imagine that China, a single nation, is giving loan to the whole continent, and we are happy about it, and that China is sharing finances or aids as somebody sharing a common birthday cake, and so everybody is having a piece of it. In a continent of 1.3 billion inhabitants, people still think that our money should be pegged to the euro, our money should be pegged to the dollar, and others to a non-existent currency. I'm talking members, the 14 members of the French franc zone, whose money is pegged to the French franc. That is an outdated and obscure or obsolete currency. You can imagine that. And you still find defendants within the continent telling you that their money is doing well. And when you ask them, that money is doing well vis-a-vis which currency, they will tell you no other currency than the French francs. You will see the interest of French in Africa, that whenever we sell, before you sell in Africa into the European market, there must be a French intermediary. This intermediary is the individual that transformed French franc into euro. You know what it means? That you sell in French franc first, before that money, that particular product is sold in euro, the value of the product stays with him. Just your rough capital is sent back to you.
Dr. Ako, let me come in here. What can we say about ourselves as Africans who keep on using the French franc, of course, which has been vomited by the French? That is, you are using someone's thing who doesn't even want to use it.
Sometimes you will ask yourself whether we are human beings. Somewhere, remember, we talk of puppet leadership in Africa. You were the one that invoked that topic. That some people are designed to become leaders of a particular province. The French people know that where you call a country is a region that belongs to the French. And so they decide who stays in power there. Remember, when President Emmanuel Macron visited Cameroon, one of the issues that was highly talked is who will take over after President Paul Biya. And there were indications that the son will take over after the father. And that we have seen it already in Chad. He left Paris, came and installed Idriss Muammar Gaddafi, and he's today the president of that particular country. We have seen the son took over in Gabon. We have seen the son taking over in Togo, which means it is like a family compound where the father decides who becomes the leader of which plot of land. This is how the French are doing, and they will continue doing it until we find people like Gaddafi, who had the audacity and the power to tell individuals at times and with action that you can't come within my backyard and that Africa belongs to Africans. You need to know that when Gaddafi came to power, one of the highest things he did was the creation of the Pan-African movement and the Pan-Arab movement. Today, you don't hear of Arabs again being together. People have not known that the killing of Muammar Gaddafi becomes an impetus, a raw material to destroy the Arab Union and the African Union. And which means today, Africans are divided more than ever before. So the France CFA is doing well. When you ask Ouattara, who is a sit-tight president detected from Paris, he will tell you that there's no problem with France CFA. He is sitting in Cote d'Ivoire, and the central bank of France CFA is based in Paris, and he has no problem with that. When you look at them all in Nigeria, or Zimbabwe, or Kenya, every country is capable of regulating its own finances. When you have financial independence, remains one of the greatest motto in economic generation. And when you come in most of these countries, you don't have a say. In fact, a destroyed French leaflet needs that same code to be sent back to France so that it is printed the same. Is that what is going on in France? During the financial crisis and even COVID, French companies were bailed out. How were they bailed out? To local African understanding, what you call bailout is simply just giving order, some few coins or papers are printed and you give to the company to expand business. Which African economy was bailed out? And from which decision? Who even authorizes it? When they come to us now during COVID, what do? They bring us aids to help us overcome COVID. Assistance, where we will pay back. The same money Gaddafi died, more than $8 billion is based in some foreign banks as Libyan reserves. Today, Libyans are taking loan from IMF. The controversy. How can I have my own money in your banks and you are asking me for a loan when my money is with you, instead of simply liberating that money to help construct my economy? Just so you start thinking that really there is a demon far from international politics. That at times some leaders, whom we call them leaders of the international community, are simply acting and manipulated by demonic forces far from even their own quarters. Because it will be wondering that Gaddafi left money in American banks, European banks. He left a Libyan economy that was not a debtor. How does it become that I'm in difficulties, my money is kept in your yard? I need to borrow money from you without my same money in your yard. I simply need to ask you, please get me part of that money, let me put in my economy and see how it rules.
But if you are disorganized, I mean, if your country is disorganized, who will I give the money?
Who dictates whether a country is disorganized or not?
At the time when we have so many...
I am in my house and a stranger is telling that my house is disorganized.
How manage?
To whose interest is that particular insinuation being done?
Dr. Akko, because at the time when there are lots of factions, you will not really know which one...
Who is talking of factions? That's what I'm saying. Who created the factions? Who brought about the disorganization? That is what I'm saying, that they know deeply that the manipulations they are doing is to serve Western interests. And the moment they find such a fertile ground, when we talk about fertile ground, it's like a fertilizer. You need destruction, that the crop is not growing for you to bring it in, so that tomorrow when the crops are going, you say, no, it is due to you, of which you created the inconveniences. Gaddafi was going to bring a unique African currency, which we are still thinking today. Remember what the French did in the ECOWAS region. Yes, the ECOWAS. When we talk of how do they call the new currency? ECO. The ECO, that was rumored and still within the pipeline to become a common currency for West African states. What did French do? France came in and picked it up to start acting as its own peg currency to the same France CFA. And nobody has taken France anywhere. This is an intrusion into the internal affairs of other nations, which they continue doing regularly. Gaddafi's death brought a blow to the future African Central Bank.
Thank you, Dr. Akuhmbom. Let me get now to Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong, who is a Muslim scholar and imam. Of course, many are those, many of the critics of the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, they say that his intentions were not very genuine, because apparently, according to them, he came to Africa as a last resort after failing in his charm towards the Middle East. And we have also seen statements from diplomatic cables and also from his close aides in situations where Gaddafi referred to considered Africans to be beneath him, and at one point in time he called Africans barbarians. Based on this, can we really say Gaddafi was really moving towards a vision of uniting Africa, or he wanted to colonize Africa?
I don't think we should consider certain words which comes out of people's mouths, other moments of anger, frustration, or disappointment as being their life mission. The issue of Gaddafi is a very big one. But before, I think we let us first understand how advanced this person was. You only have to see what happened to Libya when he went, to see how much he was quelling down. He left, we even had people being sold as slaves. Mm-hmm. So you can see how much he was putting down while he was there. Now, what is money? Because we've been talking about money, African currency. Money is quite simply some tool which is a store of value, a means of exchange, and an instrument of accounting.
Unit of accounting, good.
Now, whether this money is to respect Islamic criterion, because the Islamic criterion of money is that the money must have a real asset backing it. Good. So the fictitious fiat currency which exists today is not, from Islamic terms, considered to be money. And Gaddafi, before going on to say African currency, he prepared himself. He stockpiled, despite the sanctions and everything they did on him, he stockpiled 144 tons. I'm saying 144 tons of gold. I'm not including the foreign reserve exchange which he's had. This is just gold he hid somewhere in Libya, which has been stolen by the French when they came there to add on to their 2,500 tons they came in underground places in France. Now, it is based on that Gaddafi was to launch the African currency. He was not going to launch it. Many people have talked about the currency, but it's words. When you don't have the real asset to back it, you cannot deliver. You might have something like in Zimbabwe where Mugabe perhaps just started printing, and suddenly you had toilet tissue costing several billion Zimbabwean dollars. Now, Gaddafi planned for this situation, and the Americans as well as the Europeans knew. Let us consider some coincidences. You see, in the year 2000, Saddam Hussein decided to violate the treaty which was signed with Henry Kissinger in the 70s, where it was agreed that petroleum would be sold only for dollars. That was because they wanted to get off the gold standard and they needed some other thing which can create a demand for dollars. And so with that agreement, people now were looking for dollars in order to buy petroleum. And the Americans could stay by and just print. Obama printed himself over $9 trillion. Just, when I say print, you get paper. And then you print and it becomes money. Nowadays, they don't even go to that trouble. They call it quantitative easing. You just tap on the computer and then it becomes money. Now, so, in 2000, Saddam Hussein, in order to attack America, since he could not do it militarily, he decided to sell petroleum for euros, something which would have strengthened the value of the euro. That is why during the attack of Iraq, you found all French media were against America, and they were coming out with many documentaries. There was something behind it. But unfortunately, the Americans succeeded in killing Saddam Hussein and reestablishing the petrol for dollar, the petrodollar. Now, in 2006, Syria, which had its own gold reserve, and they refused to join the Rothschild Central Bank controlled by the Federal Reserve. Another one was Sudan. They manufactured some conflicts and created problems in Syria. And I saw in a documentary where the last consignment of 50 tons of gold were being carried away from Syria. In 2009, Gaddafi started his own, having kept it secret for a very long time. He wanted now to launch the African currency, backed by 144 tons of gold. And in terms of foreign reserve, he had nearly $97 billion. Now, they quickly realized that if he did that, then that is the end of Western hegemony. And they had to look for a pretext. And in reality, the Libyans did not rise up against Gaddafi. There were very few people who were paid, and the media came and focused on them. The majority of Libyans marched in Tripoli, and they deliberately faked the media and refused to publish that. Now, Putin in 2017 started making steps to go away from the dollar. And you see the same manipulation. They're trying to do everything to bring him down. But this time, it's not going to be as easy as Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi and all the other people. So we have a situation where a small minority, some people call them cabal, some people call them the global elite, some people call them so many things, have been controlling nearly 99% of all. There are 13 families in this world, which by a hidden hand controls the wealth of the world. And all those who are trying to liberate their people from slavery always get targeted. Many, talking about a few points which you just mentioned, even Mobutu started as a young African leader, very ambitious, starting money for himself, but when he reaches old age.
You were saying something here that a single country can decide the currency that can be accepted for oil, but I think that should be the job of OPEC. Are you saying that some single countries can sit and decide the price of oil when it is not OPEC?
No. I'm talking about the use of oil as a backing for the American dollar.
All right, okay.
That's what they call the petrodollar.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, let me come now to Professor Akuhmbom, Mark, and Tony to talk about the democratic nature of Muammar Gaddafi. You know, do you see him as someone who would have accepted another person in Africa to take over leadership? Remember that a few months before he was killed, Muammar Gaddafi crowned, he gathered some traditional rulers in Africa who crowned him King of Kings months before he's dead. Now, do you see Muammar Gaddafi as someone that, okay, after coming up with this idea of the United States of Africa, Africans come and decide that, okay, the president of the United States of Africa is going to be, let's say, Robert Mugabe at that time. Do you see Muammar Gaddafi as that kind of person who will say, okay, I'm going to submit order under Robert Mugabe? Was he democratic enough to lead Africa?
The question is, what is democracy? Because if you are defining democracy from the European perspective, then I myself, I will not even accept it. You see, we have a problem in that for a very long period of time, we have allowed foreigners to tell us what we should think. And the moment you do not have a thought for yourself, you think what others want you to think, you are a slave.
So what is democracy according to us?
The first thing is, we were told that democracy is what? The government for the people,
by the people, for the people.
Which is, I don't know whether it is.
But according to us now in Africa, what is democracy then? What should be our own democracy?
An African, in the first place, used to practice democracy from a monarchical perspective. But I'm not saying that Gaddafi as an individual would have been a monarch of Africa. Why? Because Africa has
sorry to cut you, because from what you are saying, you are saying if Africa was practicing democracy from a monarchical perspective, from what you are saying, you are trying to say that if Gaddafi, for instance, became the King of Kings of Africa, he would have remained King of Kings for life, and Africans would have been okay with it.
That's you saying it. I'm not the one saying it.
Okay, all right.
Democracy, as per African people, has nothing to do with the government of the people, for the people, by the people. Democracy in Africa has to do with the administrative capacity, where the people, don't forget, if you go back to your village, sometimes people think that the fun just become fun. It is there's a society called Kwifon that actually enthrones the fun, and they have the power to take back the throne from the fun. And this particular seat, it is true that they have said it's hereditary, but who sits on it is not determined by the fact that they are coming from the royal family. It is that same Kwifon, backed also by the power of women. Maybe you don't know that one. So in the northwest region, which you are coming from there, in your village, which is when you want to enthrone, what kind of enthronement do they do? They don't go just pick people anyhow. They look at an individual who has the capacity to manage the people, who has the capacity to work for the people. Because as a king in Africa, you don't work, people don't work for you, you work for the people. So it's a servant kingship. It is not, how they call it, an autocratic kingship. So that notwithstanding, I just want to say that Gaddafi as an individual, considering that Africa was supposed to be brought together under Pan-Africanism, could not be a single ruler. Why? Because it was supposed to be a rotative issue, where at a particular, maybe after a period of time, another person needs to sit in order to balance the issue. It would never have been one individual sitting in power. And next to that, there's a lot that has been said here. You see, if you look at the central bank that Gaddafi wanted to establish, where was that central bank supposed to be? In relation to our to information, it was supposed to be based in Cameroon. Mm-hmm. Why was it not supposed to be based in Libya? Mm-hmm. When he was the one who was supposed to back it up with gold. You see, printing money is something that is common today. We are here in Africa, we just say, why is it that we cannot get up and then we make our own money? Let every country make its own money. It's another thing altogether to print money. Because if you realize in 1971 when the American president removed the money from the gold standard and decided to establish it as a fiat, for Americans it became a problem for you to have gold. It means if you have gold, it's illegal. It was practically an illegal act. But what is true money? True money is in gold and silver, which is God's money. Mm. True money is not those things. And that is the reason why, if you look at it today, the dollar is losing its place. Even if Gaddafi is dead, that dream is still alive and will execute it in Africa. Because the gold that we have in Africa is able to sustain that. So coming back on that, your point, my brother, I think Gaddafi was not the kind of person that people had in mind, especially when you go through most of his documents. When you go through the books that he wrote, I read his green book. That green book make me to, I started saying, okay, this guy was really a genius. In fact, he was a genius. Some people have told us that he said black people were this and that. Yes, he's an Arab. That we will not change it. He's not of the same skin color like I am. So there is a way we will always look. And normally he will also look at the black person. But what made the difference was the mindset. Having grown in Africa, born in Africa, grown in Africa, and an African, he saw himself like an African, not the color of the skin. And as a result of that, he was willing to do for Africa what the Europeans have not been able to do. For generations, we had been used as slaves. We have been colonized. Until today, we are still being colonized. Then kept in the back, even though we are the most strongest. You see, when you go looking at the reason for this fear, because it's a fear. Mm. When you see somebody struggling to keep you in darkness, know that the person is afraid of who you are. Mm-hmm. There is a fear in the hearts of those people. Why? Because everything that they know came from our minds. Everything that they have on the ground came from our minds. When you go back into history, you start asking questions. How did Imhotep and his medical theories ended up becoming the theories of Hippocrates? Because 500 years before Hippocratic was born, Imhotep had came up with medical principles that permitted surgery to be able to take place. that today are being recited by doctors, but it is considered to be those of a man who came and learned from Egypt. How can somebody come and learn from Egypt and then they call him the father of modern medicine? He only learned, took the principles from where he came and saw them.
So, Professor Mark, before I get to Dr. Akuhmbom, why should we blame the West for the failures of Muammar Gaddafi, considering that, of course, his vision was not accepted by other African leaders? So why then should we blame the West for his failures?
I don't think his vision was not accepted by other African leaders. The other African leaders were under pressure. Why? Because once somebody gives you food to eat, the person controls your life. It is the stomach that caused them to withdraw from that. It was not because they never wanted it. So we should not make that error of trying to say that they refused. Every African wants the good of Africans. But some of them who have decided by greed to sell off themselves are being controlled by this Western hegemony. And as a result of that, they end up giving out our rights. So we have been sold over to the Europeans based on the fact that those who sit as our leaders practically wants to feed themselves and their children. And so they choose to sell the entire nation for the crumbs of bread. Funny enough, the bread comes from their house. It is baked in another person's house and crumbs are given to them to eat. It is so funny how we produce the flour, let me put it that way, then the bread is baked in Europe, then we are begging for the crumbs. And then you come, they say, okay, if you have to do this, this is what you need to do. There's a script, a story in the Bible about Esau and Jacob. These two guys, when you look at that story, it reflects the kind of principles in which nations use today. Where an individual sat in the house, used his brain, cooked food. The other went to the forest to hunt. After having hunted with enough energy, came back with what he hunted and refused to roast. Then choose to go beg for food from the person who was sitting in the house. Then at the end of the day, the person says, give me a birthright. He decides to sell his birthright, forgetting to know he had meat he could roast and eat and forget about that soup. Then he said, what is that birthright? Take it. Then he sold everything, and at the end of the day, he wants to complain that it was the other person who deceived him. No, he was not deceived. He was stupid. That's where we are in Africa. Our stupidity has kept us in a place where Europeans are manipulating us and using us as their tools. So Gaddafi was the only enlightened man during that period of time, and the others were completely dull, full of darkness. So we need more enlightened individuals, benevolent individuals who can come out from that darkness and lead us into the light.
Thank you, Professor Akuhmbom, Mark and Tony. Time for us, ladies and gentlemen, to take some of your messages that are coming in before we get to Dr. Akuhmbom to ask him another question. Greetings, Mr. Boh, and all the viewers of this program on My Media Prime. The program is quite interesting and educative one. I'm Clement, watching live from Baba Wandop. Special greetings to Dr. Akuhmbom. This message coming in from Tambe Chamolin, who says, greetings to you, Mr. Elvis, and all the panelists. I must say and comment on the forensic analysis of Dr. Aku regarding Gaddafi's Pan-Africanism. Kudos to you all. Tambe Chamolin, writing all the way from Boya. Greetings to you in the studio. I'm Ngubong Max in Limbe. Just wish to appreciate you for creating awareness for this exploitation of these developing countries. International trade should be a win-win deal. Thanks to Mark and Tony for those brilliant contributions. That is Ngubong Max all the way from Boya. This other message that has come in. The dollar was established as the official currency for oil prices decades ago, so Saddam could not have had the power to sell oil in euros as the Imam suggests. Saddam can negotiate to sell his oil with a specific single country with whatever currency, but not in the world market. That's a message coming in. Now let's get now to Dr. Akuhmbom to talk about Gaddafi, how genuine were the intentions of Muammar Gaddafi. Dr. Akuhmbom, do you agree with me that was Muammar Gaddafi a ruthless leader?
Well,
that's what I want to know before I ask the question, according to you.
I believe the qualitative ruthlessness at times comes to be a subjective view. A subjective in the sense that it depends on who which to pass what form of message.
True.
So if you said ruthlessness, even at home we are ruthless. At times when we discipline children or crack and even whip or flog them, your father, the child would tell the son, the father or friends, that my father is like that, is a very ruthless somebody. That my father does not take or condole with nonsense. Can you imagine that? A child is saying that you are rude and that you don't condole with what? Nonsense. Which means that somewhere he too is recognizing that you are not rude for nothing, you are rude for poor or bad behavior. Within the context of Africa, and when Gaddafi took power, we are talking of 1969. 1969 coup d'etat overthrowing the kingdom, a monarch. You need to install a new system of government where people were not used to, where people are not acquainted with. You need a brutal leadership to implement your ideas. I want to tell you that we started here with me telling you that Gaddafi was a revolutionary leader. Yeah. And there are no revolutionary leaders that take leadership for granted. Most often, it is what we call iron. They go with it, blood and war. If you want it, he's ready for it. And this is what Gaddafi did. And we are talking of not only changing Libya, but changing Africa. Meaning, he went out within this ruthlessness to iron out Libyans and start thinking of Africa. Who has ever thought of African SATCOM? African Satellite Corporation. Who has ever thought of that? Nobody will tell you that Gaddafi made it happen.
True.
And that the call you made sometime, when I went to the university, we were making 1 minute call for 500. And at time you just hear the teller, sorry, they tell you that you have to pay. We were calling from call box. But one second we were told that the African Satellite Initiative is on, Gaddafi of Libya, we have Algeria, Nigeria, and with the aid of African Development Bank. Today we make calls at less than 10 francs. Hello, good morning, you off your call. It's no longer at the 500
If you're talking about the aid of the African Development Bank, then you also know that Europe too contributed one way or the other.
No, Europe remains partners. But what I want to tell you, you should know that Africa used to pay close to 500 million US dollars as satellite fee. African continent as a whole. Today, International Telecommunication Organization, which is based in the United States. You can imagine that. But when we opted to own our own satellite for communication, it has been met with stiff resistance. Why? There is no businessman that will empower you, knowing that empowering you will give you liberty and reduce dependence on him. Thanks to the Russians, which I will thank them loudly, that the African satellite was launched with the aid of Libyans, Algeria, and African Development Bank Initiative. To what extent then do we consider a leader like Gaddafi ruthless or brutal? At that time, today, people are pricing the testes of men in Libya. People price testes. The bigger testes, big money, small testes, small money. There is a Libyan human shield market where we buy human beings to cross over the Mediterranean. Not coming of how many souls are being killed over the Mediterranean every day. Because this very issue, Gaddafi said he hated the black Africans because we are not reasonable enough. The only people that gave Gaddafi headache were not his fellow brothers Arabs, were people from south of the Sahara. Why? Governments were unstable. Poverty can kill us. Everybody's intention is to cross the Mediterranean.
So Dr. Akwa, are you saying that there would have been, respect of human rights and freedoms if Gaddafi took over as the leader of the United States of Africa?
He was already respected. I said, what I just analyzed mean that Gaddafi even respected the human person more than the present situation in Libya. We never heard of Africans trading in other Africans. We never heard of the number of deaths now at the Mediterranean Sea. I need to show you an image. A woman is being tortured with a small baby to fall back into water. She's begging for help. These assailants or kidnappers are pushing them into the stream. I have the video on my page. It's sad. Things that Gaddafi never allowed them to happen. How do you even practice on Libyan waters? It was not possible. When we talk of the huge migratory crisis in Europe, nobody will tell you that the migratory crisis Europe faced in 2015, 2016 were the cause of the open border of the Libyan space. Nobody will tell you that. Because that space is open. No longer rule of law. So how ruthless could you consider somebody who became, I said, so Pan-African in a way that we saw in his projects? The lone nation in Africa where education was free. And I want to insist with more accent on primary education being compulsory. Do you know what I mean by education being free in another part compulsory? It can be free, but you are not willing to go. But somewhere, even if you are not willing to go, you are forced to be in school.
So before I get to Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong, are you saying that Gaddafi, NATO was wrong to invade Libya to save the lives of those Gaddafi was crushing? Why you saying the lives?
Mr. Boh, that is why I started. I said the word ruthlessness depends on who is propagating, from who and to who, for who to believe. Those who made those statements were NATO members. In fact, somewhere, I want to tell you, the ruthless nature of Gaddafi even earned him the name, the mental deranged leader. A lot of leaders in Europe at the time when Gaddafi was doing these things thought that he was mentally unstable. Some people thought he was mad, but Gaddafi was going right. The Libyan economy was doing well. There is no economy in Africa where people go to school for free, where people stay in state buildings for free, no electricity, no water rent. The moment you announce you wish to get married, they still give you at least $500 to accompany you for a wedding. You have seen that way. Where? Even in the United States. We have hungry people in the US passing with guns. We need to say things that are honest. Gaddafi revolutionized his country, and it started thinking for fellow Africans that for them to make Africans stable, there was a need to go through the same ruthless nature. For you to govern, they say when the home is not stable, what do we accuse? We accuse the parents. The moment people notice that a child is not behaving well outside, say, look at this useless son of Mr. This. It is the name of the father that is viewed. And I started thinking, somewhere, you cannot rule Africans today without using the power of the rod. But now, it becomes a problem to those who use the rod for their own selfish and egoistic interests. Gaddafi acted for the interests of the continent. And we saw the projects, like what Mark was saying. Imagine if the African Central Bank was to be raised in Cameroon. And then Cameroon became the headquarters of the African financial market. Like you have Brussels as the head of the European Union. Just imagine that. Or you have Germany at the top of the European Central Bank. Gaddafi would have said, okay, since we have the highest money and the highest amount of gold, we should control the bank. True. Because he already trusted his banking structure. They can regulate the whole Africa. Why then give the other countries such infrastructure that will empower everybody throughout the continent? And we were still going to come to a standard where Africans were going even to give calls on rate free. Gaddafi was still on the research on a better satellite. Meaning today, maybe we are being hosted here by the Japanese or the Russians. You would have been hosted by maybe an African satellite. So that we stop this Canal Plus, Canal France issue, where billions are still being siphoned to the French economy. There are a lot of other loopholes. We want to look at it. Look at the alcoholic extermination of Gaddafi. When you come to a nation, if you want to create the nation wayward, is to give them stupid liquor and spirits, so that the youth should drink and forget about their future. That is what happened in south of the Sahara. Gaddafi ousted that. The West will never love it, because these are instruments of manipulation of the mindsets of many Africans. True. And he did it well. The moment they would succeed, remember, in Sarkozy's campaign for re-election, he told French people that the war in Libya was for you. So, was it for Africans?
So, Doctor, I would like you to answer this question before I move to Sheikh. So then we should be blamed, because we had an African-American president who having our own blood, who could defend our own interests. I'm talking about President Barack Obama. So then we should be blamed. it means that we contributed in destroying our own selves.
Who destroy yourself? Who was Obama? Is Obama an African? Ask them. They should answer you, those who voted him.
But you celebrated Obama as African American.
I should be capable of celebrating the people I supported in one way or the other, but not as Africans. When we watch football Liverpool play and win, we are not winning for Africa, we are winning for European club. But just that this Champions League and I love that club. Surely the World Cup is going to start after Cameroon may choose Ghana. It doesn't mean that Abedi Pele becomes a Cameroonian. Or maybe Abedi Ayew or whatsoever, or whatsoever. Now we have the Egyptians. The moment we have one African in color or in height or geographical location, we will rally behind him. True. Obama is a born American. And remember,
but he has a blood. Obama
I said blood there is no issue of blood. We're talking of education here. One of the greatest instruments of education is to change the mindset. And the moment that brain is formatted, you respond. Remember, you don't do what you wish, you do what the Constitution demands you to do. True. And the Constitution of the United States is to defend the interest of the United States. Maybe many were not aware. Before Obama attacked Libya, he justified it before the US Congress, telling them that Gaddafi has the blood of Americans in his hands. Do you know what he was trying to recall? The 1988 bombing over Elokobi, where many Americans were killed. And Obama thought it was time to reconcile with the bereaved families of Elokobi bombing. And so that doing, they had to kill Gaddafi. There are a lot of things beneath and within the table.
And of course, in an interview, he had said his worst mistake was not to have planned, the aftermath of the bombings in Libya.
Obama admitted
yes.
later on that one of the biggest mistakes made in his presidency was to condone the killing and the assassination of Gaddafi. President Trump afterwards said the world will be a better place with Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein.
True. Good.
So we are having people who made serious mistakes. What I'd like to perhaps draw attention to is that although Gaddafi did his best to provide amenities to Libyan people, we should not judge a leader from what he can provide, because that depends mainly on the resources of the country and many other things. We should judge them from what their vision is and where they are trying to get the country. Just as in passing, Gaddafi gave free education, free electricity, interest-free loan. The newly wedded had $50,000 as a gift to buy a home.
Not even 500.
The mothers, whenever you deliver a child, you have $5,000 gift in order to bring up your child. Every citizen had a certain percentage of the oil revenue direct into your account. As it is being sold.
National cake shed.
But that does not cancel the fact that there were human rights abuses.
No,
forget about that.
I'm coming. Petroleum was sold at $0.14. That's about 70 francs. Yeah. And education was free. There was no central bank controlled by the Federal Reserve, meaning that they had financial autonomy. Now, Gaddafi brought a water project from an aquifer in the south of Libya, which involved nearly 2,800 kilometers of huge steel pipelines, which was all built in Libya. It's only the cathodic protection which was provided by an Australian company. A project of $25 billion done with Libya, providing 70% of fresh water used in Libyan homes from an aquifer done here in Libya by the Libyans. And they were delivering something like 6.5 million meters cube of water every day. Now, human rights abuses. Let us understand that the media, the media is one of the biggest arms of war today. And you have a very good example in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is fought more on the media than anywhere else. Almost the entire thing in Ukraine is almost nothing happening in the field. It's all done on the media. So when people want to attack Gaddafi, the first thing is to vilify Gaddafi using the media. And the world has been conditioned to think that authority is the truth. The fact is, authority can never be the truth. The truth should be the only authority. True. And for that to happen, people will have to liberate themselves. How many airports in Africa would you go to and find that it's a foreign television company which is playing? How many Africans trust their own media? That is what the West is capitalizing on. How much money does the Western media spend to provide television programs so that Africans can sit by the television with a glass of beer and just take it? Because they love us very much, right? So you see, manipulation of the media. I just gave the example that the majority of Libyans demonstrated in Tripoli to say they should leave Gaddafi alone. The media deliberately made a blackout on that particular demonstration and went and instead took some few people in order to. So it's a case of using the media to justify a crime of bringing down Gaddafi because Gaddafi wanted to liberate Africans from economic slavery.
So are you saying, for instance, that Professor Akuhmbom, that if someone locks you up in a house and then beats you every day, and then so long as the person gives you food, pays electricity bills, and you're not comfortable, and then you can say the person is a good person?
That's an interpretation from an individual. What if the door was closed but not locked, and I'm sitting inside? As long as I'm having everything that I have, if the door is closed, not locked, I have the right to open it. It is my choice. It's not the choice of the person who closed the door. So it is, you see, most of the time, some of us, we prefer to use perspectives which might be do not fit in the context of who we are. We are living in a continent where for a very long period of time we have been made to vilify ourselves and vilify our leaders, making us to see those who, in fact, why should we call our ancestors the wicked ones? Why their ancestors who enslave our own ancestors are the good ancestors? You see, we have a problem with the way we think in Africa here. So my opinion here is people get to reproduce what they are given to produce. For example, don't forget, as a human being, we have a psycho-cybernetic brain that has been granted to us. You have an aspect of this brain which is, we call it a subconscious. But this subconscious part of our brain is what the people focus in training so that before we grow at a particular level, that subconscious mind start dictating to us what we do. You see, the habits, the attitudes we produce every day are planted in our subconscious when we are children. And from that age of 0 to the age of 7, once you have been given that, at the age where you need to start reasoning, your conscious mind reasons, but the results that come out are what the subconscious gives out. So you fight it, but you produce the same thing. And that is where we are in Africa. We have been formatted, placed under a hook, and we keep on transferring that same information from generation to generation. Don't forget, Africans are still under slavery and under colonialism. It is not because they have come and you talked of somebody locked you in a house. The greatest prison is not a prison where there's a bar on the door with iron gates and all that. The greatest prison is your mind. If your mind has been in prison, forget it. Whether you go up and come down, you will remain in that prison for life. So if we can be liberated first from here, and I think that is what Gaddafi was interested in liberating Africans from their minds. And not only Gaddafi, but Africans of good conscience know that the problem we have is not sitting in a particular home, but where we sit is here. We have been locked up, so we need to open up.
Thank you, Professor Akuhmbom. Let's get this last one from, last question from, I want to ask Dr. Akuhmbom with the last question before we close the show. It's 3 minutes to the end of the program. Now, based on the analysis that have been made by Professor Akuhmbom, it means that the Libyan uprising was a way of opening the door by some civilians who probably thought that Gaddafi was ruthless in his leadership.
It's not the uprising in Benghazi that exposed or maybe purportedly presented Gaddafi as a bad leader was manipulated from the West. We have equally seen documentary from RFI and France 24 and other media groups telling you how French people and French journalists went into Benghazi and acted a movie, and that movie became an international standard to condemn Gaddafi.
If we say that the West manipulated the uprising, we will also be saying that they are using the very media, because those media structures you are citing are serving the interests of the West.
Yeah, but that is what we are saying. Most often than not in Africa, one of the things which I decided to have a brutal look at was that the African media and the leadership in Africa was also not capable of protecting their own leaders. Because to me, what I advocated within the time was a courageous African leader that could get to Tripoli and takes Gaddafi with him. Until things get calm, Gaddafi was supposed to be leaving. We have seen that in other nations. Remember the firm position of the European Union on the eve of Ukrainian attack. And they have told the leadership in Ukraine that we'll live with you. And we are seeing that now. Nobody could imagine that a small Ukraine could go this length with a giant nation like Russia. But when you see the forces, meaning somewhere, they come and divide Africa and then put the principle of solidarity active in their own continent. Africa need to see it that until we learn to liberate ourselves, no stranger will liberate us. And as I said, the moment Africa will start thinking of uniting, it is the beginning of the collapse of the Western Empire, and that will be settled. The next thing we need to do is to find that academic program that supports and strengthens our own, rather than studying physics and chemistry of their laboratories, because we don't have the labs here. Let's study how cocoa, gari, coffee can be transformed and produced here to serve us first than importing Indian, Pakistani, and whatsoever rice. We need the industries and laboratories that will serve the interests of Africa rather than the interest of Western nations.
Dr. Akuhmbom, thank you so much. I want to give one more minute for the conclusion, because so that another program can start.
Just one thing, to show how advanced Gaddafi was. Gaddafi said this: if you are enslaved by a people and you finally think you've broken free, but you're still worshipping the God of those people, you're still a slave. True. Mm-hmm. And another thing, one European scholar said, if you want to dominate any people, give them a God to worship. As soon as they start worshiping your God, they become your slaves.
Thank you, Professor Mark. Who should take over from Gaddafi?
I think there are a lot of young Africans who are rising up, and like I said, the light is shining. Those sleeping minds are rising up. A lot of what we are saying today was not said before. And so saying it means that we have come to a light. So I'm sure that in the next few years, you will hear that not one Gaddafi has risen, but thousands of Gaddafi would have risen in Africa to free Africa. So the minds of the people is our target. You see, Bob Marley sat and sang this song. It says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. It said no other person but us can do that. So we have a responsibility to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because that's where we have a problem. We do not have a problem of materials. You see, today we blame our governments for they are doing this. We keep blaming and complaining, but we fail to realize we are the true problem. In the sense that you see, I tell people that there are two economies. You have the external economy and the internal economy. The one thing they do not know is the internal economy is greater than and bigger than the external economy. The external economy is what this country is feeding on. But your internal economy is under your personal control, and it is bigger because it is the source that empowers the external economy. And so we need to get to that in order to live better, rather than wait for messiahs.
Thank you so much. We need to come together and see what we can do rather than wait for messiahs to come and save us here in Africa. Today, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we come to the end of your favorite program, 90 Minutes in Africa, during which we took a look at how genuine was Muammar Gaddafi's Pan-Africanism vision. We had as guest today Muslim scholar and Imam Sheikh Mohammed Ngubong. We had academician, lecturer, and legal expert, Dr. Akuhmbom, and we had Professor Akuhmbom Mark Anthony, renowned Pan-Africanist. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all those who sent in messages. The program was produced by Ewane, coordinated by Leonard, supervised by Brian Tambe. I am Boh Elvis, thanking you for watching. See you next week for another edition of the program, God willing.